information never sleeps, and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good evening, folks, and welcome again to Revising Reality. Yeah, I am glad to be back on. I apologize profusely if you're just joining me. I had a technical difficulty. I think I was offline for like 30 minutes. And it was a mic issue. I was talking the whole time. I thought I had it. I don't know if I was even broadcasting when I started. I don't know. I'm kind of sad about that, so I'm going to have to wait till I get the recording and re-listen to it to find out what I did wrong. I figured it out on the technical end, however. So I apologize for that again profusely if you're just joining me. Kind of embarrassing. So the subject material for tonight was Electric Universe. I did cover a lot of that, and I have no idea how much of that I covered actually made it onto the air. I think if anybody was still listening or tuned in about 30 minutes ago, they would have caught a good bit of the Electric Universe. I was getting into Tesla, why it mattered, right up until the end of the break, that it affects our DNA. Our DNA is electrical in nature, has a lot of different kinds of things going on with it. Very interesting. And the way that animals sense their way, through the oceans and all that stuff to do wherever they go for their migration patterns. It's all through magnetism, but you can't have magnetism without electricity. So that's something that's never covered within the normal, how should I put that? The normal sciences. They don't really talk about how that actually connects us, how the galaxies are connected to the planets, to the stars, and the stars are electrical, anodes, I should say. Since nobody was actually on with me, I'm going to just do a quick introduction into the Electric Universe for you right now, just so that you understand exactly what we're getting into with this. Should be right here.
Many people today are asking, what has happened to science? Early in the space age, a president inspired a nation to put a man on the moon within the span of a single decade.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things.
But where's that sense of new frontiers today? The passion for discovery. For youngsters, it seems science has lost its meaning. Meaning comes from the things that we value. And what is the value of discovery? How could we lose interest in that? We've invited disinterest in science by our claims to already know the important questions and their answers. Just look at the picture given in the scientific media. All the great mysteries have already been solved. How the universe began, how gravity drove everything across billions of years, the birth and death of stars, our sun emerging from a gaseous cloud, planets on predictable courses for 1 billion years, and 1,000 other settled questions, or so we're told.
Like global warming, for instance?
Well, here's a surprise. Our universe is electric. It's animated by charged particles in motion. The electrically sterile cosmos we so long imagined does not exist. The electric universe will re-inspire education and science. Electricity will open new pathways of discovery, a new picture of galaxies and all the stars in the sky, our sun included. Every organism will come alive electrically. And we will begin to remember the electrical dramas in the sky above our early forebears. Take the time to discover this for yourself. A profound scientific revolution is already underway. Join in at thunderbolts.info.
Which, by the way, is Electric Universe's homepage. They have a lot of good stuff there. They have a picture of the day, which is a lot of fun. They take a random picture from like the Hubble Space Telescope, and then they just kind of put that out there, and then they talk about how it's not what the other guys say it is. They talk about like how it's actually electrical. Like they put forth both arguments. Like what would scientists say this was, and what would the electric universe say this was. It's very fascinating stuff. We're gonna do another one right here.
Contrasting viewpoints are the fuel for progress in all human inquiry. Vive la différence. A contrast can highlight predictive ability when alternative explanations are at stake.
When astronomers detected intense radiation pumping out of the Crab Nebula, one of the most studied objects in space at higher energies than anyone thought possible, they were nothing short of stunned. Space.com.
What difference does it make whether a planetary nebula is a cloud of neutral gas or a cloud of electrically active plasma? We see the signature of electric currents in the structure of luminous threads or filaments. In the vacuum of space, coherent filaments are not even conceivable without energetic electrical and magnetic activity. A plasma is defined by the presence of freely moving charged particles. Electric currents can transport huge amounts of energy over virtually unlimited distances, just as in the power grid, where the lights of cities are far away from the power plants. In space plasma, this energy of electric currents can suddenly appear as glowing streamers and even erupt in intense outbursts, all depending on the electrical conditions. Many filamentary nebulae are remarkably similar to images of dense lightning, both in storm clouds and in volcanic eruptions. That's not a coincidence. Filamentation is commonplace in laboratory experiments with electric discharge. It's often stated as fact that a galactic jet is powered by a black hole. But jets from galactic cores were explained electrically by the father of plasma science, Nobel laureate Hannes Alfvén, decades ago. Does it make a difference whether a black hole or an electric discharge drives the jet? Well, yes, it does, because our entire understanding of what keeps the universe going arises from questions such as this and others posed here. Each year, scientific exploration takes us deeper into the electrical nature of events across the cosmos. Please join us as new insights into the electric universe unfold at thunderbolts.info.
So, like, you mentioned that scientist, I think it was like the turn of the century, Hans Alfvén. His experiments showed that electric currents are essential to the understanding of plasma in space. So you find a lot of interesting things on this. It implicates just about everything. It changes the way that technology operates, if you understand this. This is what Nikola Tesla talked about every now and again. He definitely did talk about, how electricity was the force that binded everything together. And without it, we wouldn't have, you know, the electricity how we use it today. Like, he revolutionized the world with electric current. And he was shunned because he discovered some very interesting things and started to try to use those. Like, if he would have just stayed as things were after providing electricity, like, to everyone, he would have never pissed anyone off. But he decided to go ahead and do some other things, which was very interesting. So, stars are electric, planet, comets, our weather, by the way. I don't know if you've ever heard of Piers Corbin of weatheraction.com. Very interesting guy. I really want to get into this guy's stuff. So electricity powers the cosmos. You know, so what, right? Well, it actually powers the weather too. So this whole big hullabaloo about global warming. And yeah, I just said that. I said hullabaloo. I'm kind of embarrassed. But Piers Corbin is this really, really interesting character. He routinely and accurately predicts weather patterns months in advance based on the interactions of the sun and the earth. He's based in the UK. Really, really interesting guy here. You have to hear this because this guy is so well spoken. I'll turn it up if I have to, but this should be...
Our next guest said he can clearly say, "I told you so." Back in November, the UK's government weather forecasting office claimed that this winter would be mild. That's the same office pushing a global warming agenda. But here's the forecast for this winter, as predicted in November by astrophysicist and meteorologist Piers Corbin. Take a listen.
The winter, December to February, inclusive in Britain and Europe, will be exceptionally cold and snowy, like hell frozen over at times.
He was right. It feels like that outside right now. You're looking at video of an extremely snowy Britain from this week. So much for global warming. He says prepare for the ice age. Piers Corbin joins us now. Piers, how did you pull this off? How did you manage to be so accurate when everyone else in that office was saying, it's not going to happen?
Well, the science, so-called, of these scientists you referred to is failed science based on fraudulent data. We understand that the sun, solar particle and magnetic effects, which control Earth's weather and climate, and we're able to predict this a long time ahead. So we predicted that this December would be the coldest for 100 years, which it has been, as it's shown on this, and we also predicted on the 12th of December that northeast and east USA would suffer the most horrendous blizzards for decades. And we actually put out a tweet saying, "You ain't seen nothing yet."
Now, in fact, we haven't seen anything yet, and because you now are predicting that there is global cooling taking place, and that seems to fly in the face of what we're hearing at large. In fact, today in the New York Times, a piece about the trend of global warming, and their argument is, from scientists, they say that because we're seeing global warming, that's why we're seeing such weather extremes. Do you buy that science?
No, it is complete nonsense. It's fiction. It comes from a cult ideology. There's no science in there, no facts to back them up. Historically, the only correlation between carbon dioxide and temperatures over millions of years is that world temperatures drive carbon dioxide levels, not the other way around. What they have is they fiddle the facts in order to justify political attacks, carbon trading, extra taxation on the public.
But Piers, you know, the critics would say, well, wait a second. They'd say, hold on a second, Piers. They're saying we're seeing global ice sheets melting. We're seeing the Arctic Circle being opened up in such a way that Russia now laying claim to certain land up there that never before. We have ships going up there. What do you say to them?
Well, fine. The ships have been up there before. It's all happened before, and in fact, it is now closing up again in the Arctic, and the Antarctic has been cooling for the last 30 years. We are just past the peak of a world temperature rise, and we are now falling, and it's going to carry on falling in general for the next 25 years. And all these major extreme events around the world, the biggest ones, such as the heat wave in Russia and the floods and the ending of the heat wave in Russia and the ending of the floods in Pakistan, were predicted by us using our solar magnetic theory, which you can find out more of on weatheraction.com, our website.
Beyond that, I want to get your Twitter address, because I'm going to start following on Twitter so I can predict when I need to get out the snow boots. What's your Twitter address, Piers?
Twitter address is http, etc., twitter.com/Piers_Corbyn. It's as on this, if you can see the...
There you go.
That's the one.
Yeah, I might need my glasses to see that. Piers, thank you for being editor. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Have a good new year as well.
In the late 1980s, solar physicist Piers Corbyn decided to try a radically new way of forecasting the weather. Despite the huge resources of the official Met Office, Corbyn's new technique consistently produced more accurate results. He was hailed in the national press as a super weatherman. The secret of his success was the sun.
The origin of our solar weather technique of long-range forecasting came originally from study of sunspots and a desire to predict those. And then I realised it was actually much more interesting to use the sun to predict the weather.
Sunspots, we now know, are intense magnetic fields which appear at times of higher solar activity. But for many hundreds of years, long before this was properly understood, astronomers around the world used to count the number of sunspots in the belief that more spots heralded warmer weather. In 1893, the British astronomer Edward Maunder observed that during the Little Ice Age, there were barely any spots visible on the sun, a period of solar inactivity which became known as the Maunder minimum. But how reliable are sunspots as an indicator of the weather?
Okay, bye. I decided to test it by gambling on the weather through William Hill against what the Met Office said was a normal expectation. And
now I want to pause this for a second. This guy was betting money against the normal UK nationalist. He basically bet money against their predictions and said, no, this is how it's going to be. And he did it routinely, and he made money. He made money betting against them, which is hilarious to me. Like, this guy's awesome. Like, he's got real balls. And I don't say that lightly, and I guess that's kind of a crude comment, but this guy does. Like, he's going after the climate scientists, and he is going after them with hard evidence of all these years of routinely getting better predictions. And I remember reading on his website, I don't know, you can find it there. It might be on the main page. He has like an About It page where they went ahead and he predicted his friend's wedding to the hour, like 6 months in advance, and told him every hour what the weather would be like so he could have his outdoor wedding 6 months in advance. And this guy like lays down money on his predictions, which, that speaks of a lot of courage to go up against it. It's very interesting.
I won money month after month after month after month. Last winter the Met Office said it could be or would be an exceptionally cold winter. We said, no, that is nonsense, it's going to be very close to normal. And we specifically said when it would be cold, i.e. after Christmas and February. We were right, they were wrong.
In 1991, senior scientists at the Danish Meteorological Institute decided to compile a record of sunspots in the 20th century and compare it with the temperature record. What they found was an incredibly close correlation between what the sun was doing and changes in temperature on Earth. Solar activity, they found, rose sharply to 1940, fell back for 4 decades until the 1970s, and then rose again after that. To the Harvard astrophysicists and many other scientists, the conclusion is inescapable.
The sun is driving climate change. CO2 is irrelevant.
It's not the case that carbon dioxide drives temperatures. When you leave ice ages, it's the other way around. The temperatures can go up first, and then the carbon dioxide levels go up. Piers Corbyn. And he says polar bears did very well in the warmer times. They didn't die out at all. They didn't die out in the last 10,000 years, nor during the previous interglacial, nor the one before that. So they're just used as a deceitful heartthrob, to pluck your heartstrings because the polar bears might die out. That is, not possible. And they'll thrive in warmer weather. This guy is extremely smart. Like, he routinely backs up his stuff. He has his own scientific method for, getting the, how he gets his predictions, how he gets his method. It's very, very interesting. Very smart guy. I really, he has a website, like I said, weatheraction.com. He has intense documentation. Very smart dude. So there's him. And he's routinely doing this. Now, there's another guy who's predicting earthquakes. Alright? There's another guy who's predicting earthquakes using the sun and the earth. So just for today, I'm going to play Ben Davidson. He's actually originally from Pittsburgh, so he's local to me. But I guess he either moved out or he's temporarily out in Arizona now. That just happened. I think he moved out there. But he's putting together a disaster prediction app. He did the Kickstarter for it, and they got everything they needed. He has a disaster prediction app, which is going to be coming out, which will be an Android app for your phone or iPhone or whatever, and you will be able to basically look at it for earthquake predictions and find out where in the world are going to be the major earthquakes for the day, or if the earthquake watch is high for the area and that kind of stuff. This is super. You know what I mean? Like, what if you could predict earthquakes, right? That's crazy and a really cool thing. So here's Ben Davidson right here, and I think this is his today's. Every morning, by the way, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, which would be 4 o'clock in the morning where he's at. He puts out a YouTube video covering the news for the day, the solar news, weather, and that kind of stuff. So here's Ben Davidson. He's really exciting dude coming up here with all this information and all this hardcore scientific study that he's put into this as well. As soon as it starts here, he just doesn't have any audio.
Good morning, folks. Today we've got a serious space weather whack from only a moderate to minor solar wind stream. The Earth-facing quiet continues. Our earthquake baseline is back down to lower levels now that we're between coronal holes, and we've got new umbral development on the western quadrants. We also show the Earth spot lows ready to take on the US, Europe, and Southwest Pacific tonight. First, we'll come to spaceweathernews.com, though, and peek in on the last day of our star. We're finding, yet again, pure stability and calm. No big flashes, no eruptive events, just some dark coronal holes and filaments. Even within the large writhing plasma filament that we've kept our eyes on here, the motion never destabilized, and as of this morning, that enormous rope is still there. Looking on coronagraph shows a sizable CME heading north there. It actually came from the far side of the sun. The huge sunspot that disappeared a couple days ago, made only 1 M flare while on the Earth-facing disk, has let loose in a tremendous flare and filament release CME, opposite way from Earth. X-ray flux shows the flatlined Earth-facing solar flare readings. It's not that we lack sunspots, but they lack the magnetic character required for flaring. Small ones incoming and a newly born active region to the right, which does indeed already begin to push Delta-class magnetism, but he was born on his way out of Earth-facing positions, likely won't put anything our way either. Solar wind, more intensification events the last day with density shocks followed by speedier streams. Only a short level 1 geomagnetic storm cropped up globally, but on a more localized scale we saw storms hit as high as level 3. That's from Karuna. The stream responsible for the storms belonged to that departing dark coronal hole to the right. The incomers to the left represent southern negative fields and will ramp back up the earthquakes that have been absent these couple days between Earth-facing holes here. Followed a couple days later by its own solar wind stream, which does take a bit longer to arrive than the magnetic field influences and EM energy. Folks, on yesterday's Fly on the Wall podcast, we discussed cosmic strings, galaxies and quasars aligned over light years of space, strange patterns across the universe, and what they all have in common. That came after the Earth and Sun rundown, which included a recap of the number one risk to Earth, the solar kill shot, as made more likely by Earth's weakening magnetic field. Pressure and radar forecasts here, followed by shots of our star to close. It's 4:05 a.m. in the new Valley of the Sun. Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone.
So, that's Ben Davidson. He has a lot of really good stuff. Actually, he has hundreds of hours worth of material on his website. Books and videos, and they also have like a premium login where they have a bunch of free resources, but they also have like a premium login where you can get, like, I think it's like $5 a month or something, and you can get access to all these different deep conversational things that they have, all kinds of scientific evidence and rigorous tests and all their research on all kinds of subjects, especially like all about the electric universe type stuff. This guy's actually been at the Electric Universe conferences. He was at the last one. I know he was at the one before, and I think the one before that. He's been doing this for a couple of years. Very dedicated guy. Very cool stuff. There's a guy he works with named, he's Kung Pop. I'm not kidding. Kung Pop? I can't remember. I don't know how to say that properly. I don't know if I can find his name for you right now. But at any rate, like, he's one of the guys who's helping put together the disaster prediction app, which is extremely exciting. Very extremely exciting that they can try to attempt to predict the weather or predict earthquakes or volcanoes through the electric force, through monitoring the connection that the Earth has with the sun. So that's very, very, very fascinating. It would mean that climate change also, as you know, talked about by Piers Corbin, is based on electric cycles. It's not based on CO2 levels. CO2 levels actually follow the temperature rise. It's because the oceans have a lot of CO2 in them, and when they start to evaporate, they let a lot go. And then the plants also are going to start growing in a warmer environment, and then that would affect more plant growth across the planet, would affect, the carbon levels of the planet. Imagine if we had more continents, for example. Which, by the way, I've heard a rumor, which is a very interesting rumor from a very credible person. I have no idea if this is going to actually come true or not, but all the activity in the Ring of Fire, I'll lay just a little prediction out there that it could be a new continent rising in the Pacific Ocean. Maybe. Very interesting, because if you look at all the crazy stuff that's happening over there right now, there's a lot of volcanic activity, and it's all over the Ring of Fire. Some people are crying doomsday and whatever. I don't. No, just no. Don't give me that doomsday crap. I don't agree with any of the Armageddon stuff. If anybody who's listening knows me, I'm an ardent anarchist, and I know that there's people who control this world. So none of this. Don't give me any of this apocalypse crap. Like, that's what they want. It's not going to happen. It's very. I think that it's possibility that there could be something rising into, in the Pacific. There's new islands coming up as well. I don't know if you've seen that in the news. I don't have that linked on my site, but I should try to find that one too. I remember seeing the news about that. There's been a lot of new islands popping up. So, something that might be going on, and I've heard, like I said, from a very credible source that could be a possibility. I don't want to talk about who it is yet, because I can't remember if it was something I shouldn't be talking about necessarily an awful lot, because it's just kind of like one of those theories and hunches that I'm watching, because I like to watch all the current news. I like to watch what's going on in the world to keep a finger on the pulse, if you will, on like this what looks like a shadow civil war and all kinds of movement going on behind the scenes to try to salvage the control mechanism that the elites are pulling right now. I don't think that they're doing very well on that front, but they're still trying, and they could get their way. That's why I'm making this show. That's why I'm here, to talk about this kind of stuff, like paradigm shifting stuff. Because human beings don't need to be led around anymore. We need to stand up for ourselves and become whole people and understand our entire selves and have dominion over ourselves and learn to just take care of ourselves without needing anything. We don't need government. We don't need that crutch. So this is something that Piers Corbin here goes into an awful lot. And I wanted to get a little bit of more of him on here because he has a very interesting thing to say. This is a newer video.
We don't feel the cold much here on this week. Michael only needs to cross his legs and we all feel the heat. But in the interest of turning up the temperature in our drafty little studio, we're turning to this week's UN climate change talks in Paris. Now, while there's broad agreement on the need to reduce the use of fossil fuels, there's more disagreement than the average shadow cabinet meeting about how best to meet carbon reduction targets. One man who thinks we're all getting too hot under the collar about climate change is scientist, long-term weather forecast, and brother of Jeremy, Piers Corbin, who thinks all this talk about CO2 and increasing world temperatures is a myth. Here is his take of the week.
And I apologize for the audio on this video. It's a little bit strange. Like, I think that his mic was cutting out. There he is.
Despite the hype in Paris, the fact is there's no such thing as man-made climate change. Yeah, the truth is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations is a political, not a scientific body, and it even amends scientific documents before publication to conform to diplomatic niceties.
Again.
The climate alarmism plastering the media and the so-called science put forward by the United Nations is fraudulent. And what Sir David Attenborough says is a disgrace to science. And we challenge him to open debate. And one thing we would ask him is, just look at this graph. The upper curve is what their UN models predict. And you can see they fail and fail and fail again to show what really is happening in the world. The world now is cooling, and our own scientific examination of solar activity shows it will cool even more rapidly in the next 20 years.
By the way, everybody should just start moving south. It's going to be a lot warmer. Anyway, pardon me, I'm going to continue.
When it comes to CO2 emissions, they're failing on their own terms. They're actually not cutting them, but exporting them. They closed the British steel industry to reduce CO2 in Britain, and it's regrown in India to make more CO2. This is absurd. We've lost jobs.
And of course he stops again.
So let's be clear, the climate change energy charges on your electricity bill are actually a poll tax on the poor, which even causes people to die in winter when they cannot foot the bill.
And then see, now he puts up a really good point there. And I want to go into that because it's a raid the game. Again, like he just pointed out there, it's about taxes. And this guy gets it. Like, and he gets it a little bit. Like, he's not quite an anarchist, but he gets that they're trying to use the climate change to infer political control and to charge taxes based on how much CO2 you put out, even if it doesn't matter. It's a drop in the ocean. You should understand that only 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of the entire atmosphere is man-made CO2. It is so infinitesimal that it is insane. It is, absolutely.
So why is it happening? Follow the money. Huge profits have been made from carbon trading, from expensive climate change grandiose projects. Big oil benefits from price rises. Banks benefit from any trading. You do not.
And that's, again, the financial gain here. Follow the money. Follow the money. This is what science has become. See what they're using politically just to do here with this, let alone all the rest of control of not letting us understand the other kinds of things. You know what I mean? Like, they, let alone the implications that Tesla's research into the electric universe, could fix all of our energy problems overnight, and we would never have to pay for electricity again. Never mind all of that. Just understand that, they're letting people, they're trying to take your money. You work hard for this stuff. You gotta have to work a job probably more than likely, or you do something in order to make a living, because there's everything costs so much money. And if you want to try to take care of yourself or eat, better, I mean, you're gonna have to spend an awful lot of money in order to do it. And it's ridiculous.
Ice cream, tea, coffee, French baguette. We got it all here.
He said, by the way, this video was shot in an ice cream booth, and I have no idea why.
Now is the time to start full debate in Britain on the future of the climate change story. It's a con and must be closed down. That's all for today.
So that was Piers Corbyn on the climate change, but he gets to come on the show.
And from the Piccadilly Whip ice cream stall in Tower Hill to the politically whipped here in Westminster. Piers Corbyn, welcome to the programme. Now,
Good to be here.
Surely for you to be right, nearly all the world's leaders, from the President of America to the President of China, plus most of the world's climate scientists, are engaged in a massive conspiracy to hoodwink us. That can't be right.
Well, of course, most of the climate scientists, you say, but that isn't true. Of this so-called survey of climate scientists of 12,000 papers, only 0.3% of them actually stated that they, from their work, that manned CO2 had been the cause of warming. The other papers said nothing at all, including papers
But
by
most
myself.
of the world has signed on to this. All the leaders have their own scientific advisors. Although they argue about what to do.
No, they're appointed. You see, it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They appoint people to advise themselves. The IPCC is a political organisation, not a scientific organisation.
Why could so many people be hoodwinked, and why?
Well, it's easily done, and it has been done before. There's many things in the past which have been untrue and believed, such as...
Now, before he goes into this other guy here, which I do not like at all, he's like, how else would we be hoodwinked? Like, how in the world could this possibly be us hoodwinked about climate taxes? Does he have any idea that the money that we use every day is fake? That the Federal Reserve is nothing but a sham? It's a foreign corporation? That our money is worth absolutely nothing? It's not worth anything at all. And it hasn't been for a long time, since the Bretton Woods Agreement took us off of gold standard. And that was 1971, it was 1971. That was Nixon. So, you have to understand, like, we've been hoodwinked so many times we don't even know it. The United States is not what it appears. It is actually a corporation. It has no power whatsoever to tell you what you can and cannot do. Cops are corporate officers, and you're just an employee. Let that sink in for a minute, because that's something that I will get into in a future show, because it's a huge subject. But that has to be understood. There is so much corruption in this world. Everything that we think we know is wrong. Everything. And until we realize that and decide to actually get down into the bolts of trying to learn to understand our world, we're going to continue to be hoodwinked. See, our money's a sham. I mean, the IRS is a foreign corporation as well. So they have no right to take your money whatsoever. They're just collecting the paycheck, and they're sending it out to they're sending it to Puerto Rico. So you should look into that. It's not at all what it appears to be. None of it is. All right, and our ancient history also is not what it appears to be, because when you get into the electric universe theory, and when you get into understanding how the cosmos is affected by electricity, and how that matters to our climate, and the cyclical nature of it, and the catastrophism like put forth by Immanuel Velikovsky, and all the torrents of different sorts of crazy catastrophes that have befallen the Earth down throughout its history of billions of years, and that some of that can be accounted for and found out that it's happened. If you look at the global flood myth, for example, it's not a myth. It's a cultural remembering of a massive catastrophe, but what caused it? Maybe, perhaps it was a problem with planets. Because if you're in electric type circuit, things affect you. And planets aren't necessarily always the way they are now. For instance, do you know that Saturn, Earth, Venus, and Mars all share the same axial tilt? But they also share the axial tilt or they do not share the axial tilt of the sun. See, the sun and Saturn have the same axial tilt. Neptune is, I think it's Neptune. It's either Neptune or Uranus, which is a random capture. It does not have the same axial tilt. You ask, why does the axial tilt matter? The planet's tilted on a certain degree, and that represents, like, that corresponds throughout certain planets. Like we said, Saturn has the same axial tilt as Earth. Well, why is that? Saturn is also a planet that has much mythology behind it in the ancient texts. And something that is not understood by modern science is really planet birth. They say it's these accretion disks. It's not. It's actually something entirely different. It's planets. It's suns. All right. They give birth to planets, and then gas giants. They give birth to gas giants under electrical stress. This might sound kind of crazy, but there's a lot of it behind it. When you go into the Electrical Universe website, you can find information on this when they talk about the formation of planets, and it will astound you. And it goes back to, the Earth being alive, the entire, planet being part of a circuit, and we're part of that circuit. We sense that human beings, we are affected by electricity in ways that we don't understand. How many of you know that Wi-Fi is actually harmful to your body? It is. There's a lot of things that's going on in our world that's, sick and twisted. And all of this stuff, it gets all interrelated. If you go into the Electric Universe and you learn how to predict these kinds of things, like what's going on with our planet now, there's no major catastrophe going on with the sun, which means there's probably no major catastrophe going on in the Pacific right now. You see what I'm saying? Like, if we can look at just obvious signs like that, because if something bad was going to happen to Earth, something bad would happen to the sun, and we would see it coming. We could prepare for that sort of a thing. That's something that the Electric Universe does offer, because if you can learn to predict not only earthquakes or the weather, but what's happening out there in the grander scheme of things when you have like neighboring stars and planets, so you can watch neighboring stars to see if they start to fluctuate or have problems, to see any kind of problems coming down the galactic power grid, for example. Say if there was just some kind of a hiccup or it was under electrical stress, we could see that coming. That's something that should be understood. That this is a message of hope, because we can take this understanding and apply it to our lives to make a difference, as opposed to being spun by these people who control our world and want to make us accept a new tax, which, by the way, taxation is theft. It's taken by force. It's theft. If you have to pay it, if it's compulsory, if there are negative consequences to it, it's theft. We got to call it what it is. It's theft. And if they take it from your wages, then it's called slavery. We live in a state of slavery here in the United States. It's not it's a comfortable sort of slavery, a slavery that you don't even notice. But it gets harder and harder every year now. There's so much problems with the economy, and this is all a disastrous after effect of our money not being real sound money. So that goes right back to what Piers Corbin was saying about the money. You gotta follow the money. That is the key thing to all of this here, is that they can make money off of our ignorance as human beings. That's why it's so important that we learn these things, that we start to understand the world we live in so that we can apply these things to our lives, whether it be in economics, whether it be in finance, whatever it is that you're into, and whatever it is that you're just kind of curious about, you need to branch out and do the research. I cannot stress that enough. Human beings, we were told what to think. We're never told how to question. And that's something that, is a critical thinking skill that everybody needs. And it seems that I meet so many people all the time that don't have any idea or spark of life in them, because they're just watching TV and they don't even care. They're going to work and they're doing their thing, and they don't understand anything that's going on around them. I don't think that's as common as it once was. I think that things are starting to change a little bit, swing around, more enthusiasm, more curiosity, because that's really what we need. We need to start questioning, where does oil come from, for example? Could it perhaps be something else entirely other than, just a byproduct of dinosaurs being, compacted under great stress over massive amounts of time? What if oil is a byproduct of the Earth's core? Or what if oil is a byproduct of bacteria that live deep inside the Earth? That's a question that has been explored by Russian scientists, and they've done a very fantastic job of almost pretty much proving it, but their research has been basically censored. This is the problem, again, with peer-reviewed modern science, where they ignore certain ideas because it doesn't make them any money. All right, that's gotta follow the money. This whole thing is corrupted to the core, and it's all using this fake money system that we're all plugged into intimately, and we use in our daily lives. All this ties together.
You know, Galileo had a problem bringing forward the truth. John Harrison had a problem bringing forward the truth for 30 years about how to measure latitude. For 10 years, people didn't believe that, or believed that continental drift was impossible because of the entrenched interest groups. And if you want to know what is actually going on, we can tell you. But that graph I showed shows that the theory they put forward is not working. So under the Climate Change Act, Section 6, Part 2, it states very clearly that if the science changes, i.e. information changes, then the measures have to change and should be discussed. So what's saying is we have to reopen the debate on climate change and actually not impose these charges which are closing British Steel.
But you said, you claimed in your take there that the world is now cooling.
Yes.
But that's not borne out by either the land or the satellite temperature measurements, is it?
It is.
Not up till now.
Look at the graph again.
Yes, it is. I really don't like this guy. He's just taken whatever he was told.
It is. Yes, it is.
But the past, temperatures
look
now.
At the graph. Temperatures now shows that.
Temperatures now are, on average, about 0.5 degrees above where they were 35 years ago. But people argue about a pause.
There's
but
0.5 degrees of fraud, and you can find that on the website.
But that's all the satellite measurements I know show that the temperature has been right. Now, there's an argument about
not the satellite measurements. So-called land measurements show an increase, but they are fraudulently chosen because they change the data sets on the way through. And you can go on the weatheraction.com website and see this, or many other.
But we've had since, people argue about a pause, whether that's there, how long it will last. But since 1997-98, we've had some of the warmest years on record.
Oh, we had some very warm years, yes.
So how can it be called?
The average in the last, the recent peak is the same as, taking away the data fraud, the same as the peak in the late 1940s.
Michael, you're a bit of a sceptic, I think, on global warming, but would you go as far as Piers?
Well, I'm not scientifically qualified, which Piers is, but what has made me very suspicious is that
Ooh, he just dropped the bomb there, I think, because that other guy that's been arguing all this stuff, yeah, he's not a scientist. He's just some host. And he obviously just discussing his talking points. So I'm like this guy immediately just for saying I'm not scientifically qualified, but Piers is, and he's saying this.
I do feel there's been a sort of bandwagon around all of this. I'm so pleased to hear Piers on the BBC, because at one point the BBC said that the debate was settled and they didn't want to hear anything more from climate skeptics. But even if one did accept that there was global warming and that it was man-made, the assumption is that the way to tackle this is by massive human self-sacrifice in the developed countries. And I think Piers makes a very good point that what that does actually is to export jobs and to export the possibility of creating carbon dioxide to other countries. But in any case, it seems to me that the first thing you would ask yourself is, what is the cost of dealing with climate change? I mean, climate change has occurred frequently in the past, and human beings have had to adapt to it. So assuming that we might adapt to it in the future rather than trying to prevent it, and I think there's a huge loss of humility in believing that we can prevent it, what would be the cost of that? What would be the consequences? And I don't think we've ever had that rational debate.
Well, that's what the Stern report was about.
That
did the costing.
I think people...
you could argue with it, but that's what it did.
I think people have got themselves into...
But it's a laughing stock around the world, the Stern report.
I think people have got themselves into a frame of mind that, human beings are basically sort of evil, that that we are overindulging ourselves, that what we need to do is restrain ourselves, that globalization is the consequence of this, is the cause of this, that capitalism is somehow involved in this. I mean, I think the whole thing lends itself to hysteria.
Alan, what's your take on this?
Now, I'm pretty much done with that because we only have a couple minutes left. So, he points out some really good stuff. Why is it that human beings feel so guilty about the things that we have accomplished? And I think it's because a lot of us have this overwhelming sense that something is off. And even the people who are asleep have that sense, especially now. There's been this sense that something is off, something isn't quite right. But most people just ignore it, push past it. I could not. I had to start digging into things, which led me to creating this show and researching for all these years and finding out about people like Piers Corbin. And I've even bought some of his reports for the United States when planning like motorcycle trips and the like to see what the weather's going to be like in advance. Like if I want to know months in advance, like if I should plan something for then, I could go ahead and look, at this website, and I could pay some money, and then I can get a forecast for the geographic area of the United States from Piers Corbin, and it'll be pretty much spot on. Like, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's very cool, and it's not something that you would ever expect. Most of us are, every day we walk around going, oh, the weather's only 50% right. How are we supposed to know what it's going to be? You can't plan, people plan to plan weddings, for example. Like, how are you supposed to do that if it's really hard to figure out, what is going to happen that far ahead when the meteorologists are always wrong, and they're wrong so often, it's ridiculous. It's sad, really, and it's part of our lives. I mean, weather isn't as big of an issue now necessarily because we're an industrialized society here in the United States. It does matter to the farmers, because we got cars, we got houses, we've got all this stuff, all these electronic gadgets. We don't have to go outside if we don't really want to, as often as we don't have to. But ancient man, it was far more important, and it really is important in the general scheme of things. Because what if weather is harnessed as a weapon? I mean, there's a lot of research on the chemtrails, on the weaponization of weather, on HARP. There was the facilities at Pine Gap, and there was another one in England, and there was another one up in northern Canada. And these facilities, they utilize Tesla's research in a very evil way, and they're able to cause earthquakes where they wish them to be because of the places that they're put and the geometry of their substructures within the Earth's crust. They're using Tesla's research to do this. It's been weaponized. Other things that they've weaponized from Tesla include, say, his quote-unquote death ray, which was really a scalar wave. How shall I put this? It's based on a concept called scalar wave interferometry, and you have two different scalar waves, and they collide, and it causes some kind of damage. Some have said that the Tunguska explosion, which the Electric Universe people will point out that it should be a meteor crash, and I'll tell you how that actually is how meteor crashes differ within Electric Universe theory. But there's been a lot of interesting theories tossed around that Tunguska explosion has a couple of characters that throw it off from the usual meteor explosion, and that perhaps Tesla, when conducting research and experiments with this technology, with the scalar wave technology, accidentally overshot the North Pole when he was trying to blow something up. He was going to blow like a hole in the ice in the North Pole, so nothing would hurt. He just wanted to find out if it happened. And he might have caused the Tunguska explosion, which is very interesting. But that's the power of the technology. That if you look up the Tunguska explosion, you'll see just destroyed, ruined trees. It looks like a nuke went off. It was a huge thing. Anyway, looks like we're up against the end of the break. Visit rerisingreality.com, and thank you all for listening, and have a fantastic night. I will have a YouTube video of this last hour of the show up, because it looks like that's about all that I got. I apologize for that again. Have a good night.